Hello and welcome to Thomastown Park. My name is Christopher Parry and I work in Cyfarthfa Castle Museum and Art Gallery. But today I'm in my not native parkland of Thomastown Park. And we're here because as community officer for Cyfarthfa Castle Museum and Art Gallery, I get the opportunity to work with lots of different people on lots of different projects. And I was asked quite some time ago by Tom Bramley and Jill Hampson of the Planning and Countryside Department in Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council if I were to work on a parksalive project. And the idea was I would be given some tours of different parklands around Merthyr. But obviously the COVID-19 pandemic happened and we weren't able to bring those to you. So this is our version of a little interactive tour of Thomastown Park. So initially I was going to do this with public, but now I'm going to do it as a digital video to take you through. And we're going to be talking a bit about the formation of Thomastown Park and how it's important and how its formation led to all of the other parklands around Merthyr being formed. It's a really important landscape this is. And so yeah, hopefully you enjoy and we will get underway. So Thomastown got its name from William Thomas, who was a local doctor. He was trained from the surgeon of Cyfarthfa Works, Dr. Davis, back in the day, and he used to call himself an Aborigine of Merthyr. He was incredibly proud of his local roots and heritage. But he married into a family, the family who owned the Court Estate as it was known, which owned 172 acres over this part of Merthyr, including a disused quarry and tip, which is what Thomastown Park and the recreation grounds that we're in now was actually once upon a time. So Merthyr in the 19th century was totally without any parks or recreational spaces. It was an incredibly difficult life for anyone wanting to just get out and have some space. You'd have to go quite far afield to actually get into the open air or actually have a walk, because in many ways you would end up trespassing on someone's land and it wouldn't be a good outcome to that. You would be held up in court. People were battling for decades to get just one main open public space in Merthyr. And believe it or not, it was a lot more difficult than anyone would ever imagine. Generations of Merthyr people were battling for a space like Thomastown Park, but not many of them would experience it. In the 1870s, there were many letters that appeared in the local press appealing for recreation grounds to be open. One letter said, "We may, it's true, go out as a group onto the tips that overshadow Thomastown and see how delightful it is to be a pauper. But even then, we must keep to the walks or risk being summoned before the magistrate." So even as early as the 1870s, letters and people in Merthyr were constantly pushing for it. But what's crucial, as you can gather from that letter as well, is the Thomastown area, the tips and the quarry, were already used to a certain degree to have a wander round. But it was not a peaceful, laid out landscaped area. It was a tip and a quarry. You disused tip and quarry, yeah, but still an industrial landscape, though didn't have any of the greenery or lush plant life or anything that exists nowadays. So the tips up on Thomastown also became a famous meeting place where many meetings happened. Take in 1898 when the general strike was happening. Many Merthyr people were on strike, particularly the coal miners, to abolish the sliding scale of wages, which would rudimentary go down depending on the cost of coal. And in 1898 a mass meeting was held at Thomastown Tips here, and it was only the second time that the famous James Key Hardy actually came to Merthyr to speak. And it was during this speech and his actions during the 1898 strike that he actually made a massive impact on the lives of people in Merthyr and would later be elected to become an MP. Just 2 years before the strike happened, local miners got together and tried to appeal to all the local schools to throw open their doors to the schoolyards and large playing areas attached to the schools in Merthyr Borough, just to get kids outside of school hours some place to actually play and walk around, an open space of some kind. Again, it's just this one of many pushes to try and get a recreational space. But I fell on deaf ears, unfortunately, and the school grounds were never opened in Merthyr Tydfil, but the battles would keep happening. But then a landmark happened. In 1897, a series of letters started appearing in the newspapers around Merthyr. It was the young people of Merthyr Tydfil that had now taken this cause of recreational spaces in their own hands. This landmark letter was written by a child, And like all the previous appeals to open recreation grounds and playgrounds, this was made by a child. All the others were made by adults, but this one really captured the imagination and was really the catalyst to start serious, in-depth conversations about opening recreational playgrounds. The letter reads as follows. I have never written to any newspaper before this, but I should like you to print this letter if you will. I and some of the other boys who live in Thomastown were reading in the Merthyr Times about some boys, our friends, who were fined just for playing ball in the street. We had a kind of meeting and long talked about it, and in the end the other boys asked me if I would write the letter. I don't know exactly where to begin though. It really is rough on us poor boys and on the girls too, who like to play skipping rope and other games, that we have no proper places to play in except the streets, and when we play there the bobbies catch us and frighten us and summons us, and in the end we have to pay a fine which takes up all of our money that we have been saving. This letter really was the catalyst to start off a whole campaign of letters sent to the Merthyr Times and many other newspapers, but also targeted at landowners like Mr. Crochet. The county school, for example, the boys of the county school would make it their mission to send letters to different landowners, appealing to their good nature to actually give a bit of land over so they could have a playground and recreational space. In July 1897, a local solicitor named Frank Trahan James would step forward and donate 16 acres of land that he owned on the Thomastown tips towards the creation of a new recreational space for Merthyr Tydfil. It would be a landmark because finally, after decades of asking and pushing, someone had finally given over land, and the council and the locals could actually start to begin to make a large open recreational space for the people of Merthyr. The work didn't start straight away though in 1897 when Frank gave over the land. It would be a few years before certain contracts and certain decisions were made and work had to be officially started. So when 1900 hit, the park was in full swing of getting laid out, fenced off and created. Then, by 1903, the official opening would happen. Even though previous to that date the park was open to the public for different occasions, take for example in 1902 when they laid down trees for the royal coronation, but it wasn't officially given the title as open until 1903. So we are the Gwynedd Circle here, which is just down from Thomastown Park Main and opposite the recreational grounds. And in 1901, a year or so after this was constructed, this was the site where the National Eisteddfod started from in Merthyr Tydfil. Thousands upon thousands of people gathered around the stones and then moved their way through the town to head to Pendarren Park for the main events of the day. Later on in that same decade, in 1910, this was where, again, thousands upon thousands gathered to open the extensions at Thomastown Park. The latest additions and extensions opened in 1910 would make it look, on a map at least, exactly the same as it would do today. The extensions were opened by Frank Trahan James's daughter, Lorna James, and she had a particularly interesting and apt speech on the opening at the Circle in September of 1910. A wilderness, she remarked, had been turned into a place of beauty, given pleasure to thousands. The beautiful in art and the beautiful in nature, when thrown open to the public for them to admire, was always doing someone good. It was a lasting good, and succeeding generations would bless the efforts of all of those who laboured to create such pleasant places, specifically in manufacturing towns where people of all classes could come to enjoy themselves in the open air, surrounded with refreshing trees and flowers. Thomastown Park was a landmark for open public spaces in Merthyr Tydfil, and in 1910, when they were opening the extensions, there were other parks finally opening their doors to the public of Merthyr. Cyfarthfa Park was open, Treharris Park was in the making, and many other spaces would be soon open to the public, improving health, well-being and life in general for everybody in Merthyr Tydfil. If you visited Thomastown Park today, you would see a different view from the grounds. But ultimately, the layout of the land is the same as it was in the early 20th century, and the park is still used by thousands of people every year. and it will never be forgotten as the first proper public open space for the people of Merthyr, and hopefully in many generations to come it will stay exactly the same as it is now.